During 2024 and 2025, Tough Pigs participated in Disney's 70 Years, 70 Muppets promotion. You might remember on this podcast feed, we all hosted episodes for each of the Muppets Disney honored. You may also remember that over on the Tough Pigs Discord, a lot of fans enjoyed guessing which Muppet would be featured next on the feed. Some fans wanted Annie Sue to be featured. I really hope that Annie Sue gets a spot, given that there's only 20 characters left. Muppet Spot, August 1st, 2025. Annie Sue would be golden. Gavin, October 30th, 2025. By the end of the year, the pigs were going bananas. I'm going to hold out hope for Annie Sue, but it's slowly dying by the week. Chetzy Mitz 72, November 21st, 2025. I hope Annie Sue makes it at least. Bratton 222, December 5th, 2025. If Annie Sue is not included, that's a pretty weird exclusion. She's on Disney Plus and would be another female character. Like, she's not Miss Piggy or Gonzo, but that's a pretty major character to toss aside in favor of a goat and Howard. Tori, December 11th, 2025. Seriously, if it's not her this week, then Annie Sue was robbed. Chetzy Mitz 72, December 11th, 2025. It wasn't Annie Sue that week, or any week. Disney forgot about her. Back in early December, when this was happening, and with my insider knowledge that Annie Sue was not on the list, I asked the Tough Pigs Discord, does anybody actually like Annie Sue this much? Or do we all just like Louise Gold? And folks, I wasn't kidding. I wanted answers. Welcome to 70 Years, 70 Muppets. More Muppets, please. This is the podcast where we celebrate the Muppets' 70th anniversary with a series of spotlights on our favorite Muppet characters, from fan favorites to the most obscure. I am this week's host, Becca Petunia, and the Muppet of the Week is Annie Sue, performed by Louise Gold and making her world debut in 1978. Now, if you ask Muppet superfans, like all you listening to this podcast and all you I quoted in that cold open, many of us would claim Annie Sue was an important part of the Muppet Show. What's most notable about her, of course, is that she was one of the only recurring female characters on the Muppet Show with a female performer. Basically, the only other one is Hilda. Growing up, I mostly knew her from the rhyming song, because that's what was included on the Muppet Show music album in 1979, and I had a tape of that in my car. But yes, if you asked any of the Tough Pigs who the most important female Muppet Show Muppets are, we'd all obviously include Annie Sue. And look, I would have liked to see her in Disney's initial list. But yeah, that's because I like Louise Gold, who has a beautiful singing voice and was the only major female puppeteer in the Muppet Show troupe for a while there. I don't know if I like Annie Sue, though. I mean, I don't dislike her either. She's just barely there. A few solos, 2 backstage plots, a couple group musical numbers. But Annie Sue doesn't even appear in the Rainbow Connection finale. Bert's girlfriend appears in the Rainbow Connection finale. So here's my question. Was Disney omitting Annie Sue a massive oversight? Or was this just a natural way to treat a character who hasn't had a single line of dialogue since the Roger Moore episode? I don't think I can answer that question. Yes, they left her off the list, and yes, they did include the screaming goat instead. But I can't say what Disney was thinking. What I can do is investigate something related. Is Annie Sue actually that important of a character to the average Muppet fan? I don't mean the average Tough Pigs writer, because we care a lot about the correct spelling of Mildred Huckstetter's name. And I don't mean the average Tough Pigs reader, because the average one of you guys made a ton of posts about Annie Sue on the Tough Pigs Discord. I mean the people that you meet when you're walking down the street each day. The people who like the Muppets a lot, but aren't thinking about getting a Java tattoo on their elbow. The people who would wear an I appreciate the Muppets on a much deeper level than you shirt, but maybe wouldn't wear an I appreciate the Muppets on a much deeper level than the person wearing an I appreciate the Muppets on a much deeper level than you shirt. Normies. So I decided to do some research. I made a survey called About This Muppet 2026, a sequel to the survey I made back in 2021 that led to the article Understanding Pepe the King Prawn. In that article, I explored whether casual fans actually know what Muppet projects have Pepe in them, and if they know what the joke of Pepe is. Now, I wanted to know if they knew who Annie Sue was, if they could name her, identify projects that she was in, and describe her personality and role on the show. This was going to be even harder, because I hypothesized that casual Muppet fans would know nothing about Annie Sue. About 100 casual Muppet fans answered my survey. This is not a Becca Petunia podcast bit, like when I pretended to run a TED Talk for the Talking Houses. This is real. I got 98 casual Muppet fans to do a silly survey about Annie Sue. If you didn't see this survey, it's because you were too big of a Muppet fan for me to have asked you. What did I learn? Well, here are some facts. I broke the data down based on how much participants said they loved the Muppets overall on a scale of 1 to 10. No one I surveyed liked the Muppets less than a 6 out of 10. This means that I effectively broke my data into two groups, casual Muppet fans and more dedicated Muppet fans. No one I surveyed hated the Muppets. 54% of casual Muppet fans thought that Annie Sue was Miss Piggy at first glance. Only 18% of these Muppet fans felt certain they had seen her before. Of more dedicated Muppet fans, 35% thought she was Piggy at first glance. Only 28% were confident they had seen her before. Could they name her? Well, none of the casual fans could. Only 9% of my sample size knew she was Annie Sue. This gets to roughly 12% if we include the kinda correct answers of Sue, Annie, and Anna Sue. So what did Muppet fans have to say about her? Well, some people's memories were correct. One enthusiastic fan correctly identified her as Carbon Paper Pig, referencing a song she performed in the Leo Sayer episode, which was sort of her first appearance. Like Scooter, she appeared a few times on the show before her formal introduction. This fan also guessed that her name was Sue Ellen, which is close. They maybe confused her with Arthur's cat friend with the same haircut. Another correct memory was that she was Miss Piggy's rival, though this participant had no guess for her name. One participant said she was kinda, sorta Miss Piggy. I guess. Another person said she only appeared in like 2 to 3 episodes, which is, well, sorta right if we're counting backstage plots. And yet another said, doesn't she just make Miss Piggy annoyed? Which, yeah, I guess so. Some other people clearly were making guesses, but these guesses wound up being correct. These include, she seems like the Muppet version of Nermal in relation to Garfield, 80s curl pig. I think she's probably sassy because she's sitting on the piano. And I do need to be clear, I showed them a picture from Daddy Wouldn't Buy Me a Bow Wow. So she's sitting on that piano. One person said a doll, as in Susan B. Anthony's doll or drudge quote. And wow, with this feminist history, I feel like I'm on an episode of A Prairie Dawn Companion. And of course, my friend Gregor said, oh, she's so cute. Her name is I Love Her. So say hello to I Love Her the pig, everyone. Other guesses were not as good. These included Miss Piggy's baby, Miss Piggy Earth 2, Miss Piggy's half-sister that went to finishing school and didn't inherit their alcoholic father's rage issues, a spinster aunt who had an absolutely wild life from age 17 to 50 and occasionally lets slip weird skills and stories that continue to shock and amaze, and my personal favorite, she's a succubus who tried to replace Miss Piggy in order to feed on Kermit's yummy life essence. I'm listening. And of course, we had some guesses that were incorrect memories of things that had never happened. These were, it's Miss Piggy's cousin who comes to visit. She's in an episode in the 80s. I mean, Annie Sue is in an episode in the 80s, but she's not Miss Piggy's cousin. Another person said, I think she was an early Muppet before Miss Piggy became a thing. Nope, Miss Piggy definitely predates Annie Sue. Others confused her with other female Muppet pigs, which makes sense. A lot of people assumed she was Denise, though no one could remember Denise's name. Got a lot of it's Kermit's rebound from that Muppet show. Multiple people thought that she was Belinda or Bettina from Muppet Christmas Carol. She's not. One person said Petunia. That's a Looney Tunes pig, not a Muppet pig. Or it's a Muppet podcaster, but I think they were confusing her with Petunia Pig, not with Becca Petunia. And two people assumed she was Piggy Lee. No, Piggy Lee is Miss Piggy. Kinda. Listen to the fantastic Miss Piggy podcast, and it'll make sense. And of course, our friend who called her Carbon Paper Pig described her deal as a sassy singer who isn't putting up with her horrible boyfriend anymore. I can only assume this person believed the song Carbon Paper was her canonical life story and not just an actress in a vaudeville show performing an old song. Now, one thing that did surprise me was that a lot of people assumed Annie Sue was a parody of a famous actress or musician. Responses that dealt with this included Marilyn Hamrow, Bonnie Tyler, Pig Bassinger, Sabrina Carpenter. Is she playing Babs? Neil Sedaka, and someone who said Dolly Parton meets Terry Garr. And things get real interesting there, because a lot of people assumed Annie Sue was supposed to be a Dolly Parton reference. Such people responded with things like, she sends free books to disadvantaged school children and was hilarious in 9 to 5. Her top hit is Overplayed, but the rest of her greatest hits are Chef's Kiss. And she sends free books to preschoolers and is terribly fearful of Jolene. And Perhaps a Dolly Parton-esque riff on Miss Piggy? And Miss Piggy knockoff imitating Dolly Parton? And is she the Piggy Dolly Parton? This thought honestly never occurred to me. Maybe because I knew Annie Sue and the actual Muppet parody of Dolly Parton, Polly Darton, long before I was aware of Dolly herself. I know. Look, I was a big Muppet kid and not a big radio kid. I was usually listening to Kermit Unpigged in the car. You know how it is. But I guess I can see the Dolly Parton connection. And a lot of people assumed she was some kind of country musician, even if they didn't also assume she was Dolly Parton. These responses included, "Ma'am, Miss Piggy's less glamorous country cousin," "a country western piggy equivalent," "a little pig in the big city trying to make her way on the Muppet Show," and my favorite, that she is, quote, "being cute, wearing cute dresses, maybe a Southern belle, she's trans, Miss Piggy is probably pissed she exists, she deserves none of this slander." And honestly, that response maybe says more about my friend group than it does about the average Muppet Show viewer. Did people remember which projects Annie Sue is in? No. Only one person of the roughly 100 people surveyed could correctly identify 2 projects that featured Annie Sue. Now, almost everyone guessed or said The Muppet Show, which is correct. But oddly enough, no one could name a second project that had Annie Sue in it. And I think that's because she's really not a presence in the Muppet movies. The only movies she's in are Muppets Take Manhattan and Muppets Most Wanted. So it's definitely hard to just guess randomly. Did you know those were the 2 movies that she's in? I also figured, hey, while I had these folks, I'd ask them what female Muppets they did remember, specifying I wanted female Muppets who weren't on Sesame Street or Fraggle Rock. Now, the most common answers, as you can probably guess, were Janice and Camilla, though some people called Janice Janet, and some people called Camilla Henrietta or Clarissa. Skeeter was the other most common answer and was real common, which I guess, again, says something about the fact that I mostly know millennials who grew up with Muppet babies. My favorite Skeeter answers, though, were the one that referred to Skeeter as a gender-swapped Kermit assistant. Yeah, I can see that. And did Skeeter have a sister? Was that guy's name Skeeter? Which gives me a lot to unpack, actually. Other common responses, because I know you're curious, were Ma Bear, Maureen the Mink, Ma Otter, and Hilda. And some of my favorite responses I got were, quote, "the ones that sing doo-doo-doo-doo-doo," Astoria, the hoarder lady from Labyrinth, the girl from Dark Crystal, Yaddle, who's, not a Muppet, but part of our family, I'd say, and one particular person who said, "the turkey that I did a whole podcast about." Hi, Addison. She really is forgettable if you can do a whole podcast about her and then forget her name. And of course, 2 people tried to remember Mildred as the purple one from the Valentine's show and Margot Hofstetter. I love you both, whoever you are. Speaking of love, I also asked if people liked Annie Sue, either from their memory or just from seeing her picture. The answer is that people loved her an average amount. It was a real bell curve here, statistics freaks. What does this mean overall? Well, Annie Sue isn't exactly a very memorable or important character to the average person. And maybe she does look too much like Miss Piggy to really stick with people. I think it's sad to me, though, that one of the only recurring female Muppet Show characters performed by a woman is this forgettable, this nothing. I think the Muppets deserved better in the first place. But I don't know. These folks came up with some good backstories. Maybe Disney can bring her back as a succubus who feeds on Kermit. My inbox is open.
70 Years, 70 Muppets, More Muppets Please is a Muppet fan podcast presented by ToughPigs.com. Hosted by a myriad of people and edited by them as well. Produced by Joe Hennis. The Muppets 70 logo is used with permission by the Muppet Studio, with thanks to Danny Iglesias, Frank Reifschneider, and Lee Slaughter. Don't forget to follow ToughPigs.com on all social media platforms, and you can support us by heading to patreon.com/toughpigs or by buying merchandise at tpublic.com/toughpigs.